Tawdi Sagi, Abuna Gabriel, and Tawdi Turoy, and to the board for inviting me. I don't know about this young business. Roy and I were chatting what to talk about. And he said, George, you've been traveling a lot. We've been following you on Facebook. Can you tell us a bit about your travels? So we decided maybe we can limit it a bit and talk about our various monasteries. Monasteries are very important in the life of the church. Monasteries are not only places where monks and nuns are living. In fact, we have a shortage of monks and nuns in our church, so our monasteries don't have that many monks and nuns. But they are cultural centers for our faithful in various places. The same way the MAC here is a cultural center for us. So we decided we will talk about the various monasteries and some of the adventures. On some of the pages, you see me, an old man with a stick. Climbing up mountains is not easy, as in somebody who grew up in mountainous areas, like Bishop Malatya. You see him walking on top of a mountain as if he is on a scooter, so easy for him, but not for me. That's not me, okay. Sounded like my phone. So we will start with, let's see how this is going to work. I'm trying to click. There we go. We're going to start with St. Marks Monastery in Jerusalem. I actually grew up there, so it wasn't a monastery where I traveled to. I even had a room there at some point where I could go and stay. St. Marks Monastery is said to be located on the site of the Last Supper. So, according to tradition, it is very ancient. Historically mention of House of Mar appeared for the first time in the 9th century in the writings of a writer called Ioannis of Dara. There is an inscription that was discovered in 1940 in Syria. It reads, "This is the house of Mary, the mother of John, who was called Mark." That's why it's called St. Mark Monastery. And it was proclaimed a church by the Holy Apostles in the name of the Mother of God, Mary, after the ascension of our Lord Christ into heaven. It was built a second time after Jerusalem was destroyed at the hands of King Titus, the year 73 of Christ. Now, this monastery, as other monasteries, I said they are cultural centers, but also they are refuge at times of difficulties. So, for example, after Saifo, many people went to Jerusalem, and St. Mark was the place that was basically taking care of them. And not only families and our people, even our patriarch, when he was no longer welcome to remain in Deir Za'faraan in Mardin, which was the seat of the patriarchate, he had to leave to the newly established Turkish Republic. He went to Jerusalem and in fact tried to re-establish the patriarchate in Jerusalem. But it didn't work out. There are many rules in Jerusalem between the Christian communities. Other communities said, the Syriac don't have a patriarch in Jerusalem, so we're not going to have it. So it didn't work out. It also became a refuge in 1967, after the war. And after that period, the Syriac quarter around the monastery, many families were living around the monastery, bit by bit got diminished, and it was almost all taken away, so there isn't that much of a Syriac quarter there. I visited 30 years later. Everything was as if it was the same, and they're always welcoming. So I encourage all of you, when you go on your trips, to always visit these monasteries we're going to talk about. The second monastery I'm going to talk about the other way is Deir Barsaumo in Malatya. And that was an adventure. I mentioned that the Patriarchate was in Deir Za'faraan in Mardin. It was there for about 500 years. We will talk about Deir Za'faraan. Before that, the monastery was in Malatya in Deir Barsaumo. Deir Barsaumo doesn't exist anymore, only ruins. And the question is, where is it? And around 2010, I believe, Bishop Hanna of Aleppo, the kidnapped bishop, we wish that he will come back safely. And I and another scholar called Khalid Dinno, we went from Aleppo in search of the monastery. Bishop Melki of Adıyaman met us once we crossed to Turkey. And we got to the location, and we're going to climb up the mountain. And you see this mountain. And it was quite dangerous. I mean, at some point I told Bishop Hanna, we are crazy. If anybody of us just slips, this is it. There's no like, is he going to survive? This is it. It's such a difficult climb. And at some point, Bishop Melke, let's see him on the next slide here. He said, you guys stay here, I'm going to go look for it. Because otherwise we would have never found it. Then we waited for about 1 hour, and then he was shouting from the top of the mountain, I found it, come, and then we climbed up the mountain. It took another hour and a half, I can't remember, and we got there. It was such a beautiful scene, and the only thing I told Bishop Hanna, the only thing that's regretful is that we did not take with us what is necessary to do a korobo. We should have done a korobo here, even though if there is no altar, and even if there's no tablito, under the altar there where Abuna is, you don't see it, there's a piece of wood called tablito. Without it, we cannot offer the liturgy. You can take it to a place and do a liturgy, but even if you don't have it, canon law allows us to do a liturgy on the hands of a deacon. But of course, we didn't have material with us, so that was an opportunity lost, so to speak. Next, I'm going to talk about Deir Za'faraan. After Malatya, Deir Za'faraan in Mardin became the seat of the Patriarchate for over 500 years until Saifo, when the Patriarch had to leave. We call it Deir Za'faraan. You know what Za'faraan is? Those who know how to cook. Saffron, yeah? It's a spice. That's just the nickname of the monastery. They say maybe because the walls look of the color of saffron. But it's the official name, the saint's name, is Mor Hananio, who re-established this monastery in 793. But the monastery is quite old. What you see here is actually from more than 4,500 years ago. And it's not a monastery, this is not a church, that's a temple. This is before Christianity. It's a temple dedicated to the Mesopotamian sun god Shamash. So it was a temple, and then when Christianity came to the area, it became a monastery. Now, this monastery, because it was the seat of the Patriarchate, had many activities. The Patriarch in the 1800s was called Peter III or the Fourth, depending how you count. He visited England all the way from Mardin in the 1800s, and he brought back with him this printing press. So they printed many books. They started printing. That's where publication started in the Syriac Church. And one of I visited this monastery a number of times, but in 2005, I told the bishop, can we visit the library, the manuscripts library, the old library. So we visited there, and by chance, I saw in the corner of my eye two boxes, huge boxes with papers in them. People like me go after papers. So I went there and I saw old documents, and I said, so you know, what are these? He said, these are the letters that used to be sent to the Patriarch. So in the course of about 7-8 years after that, many trips, we digitized all this material is very important material. It's all the letters that were sent by people like us. You know, you need something from the Patriarch, you write to the Patriarch, so that will tell us a lot about the history of that period. And some people are now doing research on that archive. Another monastery in the area in Turabin, many of you may know of this. This is Deir Gabriel Monastery. It is also called in document the Monastery of Qartmin. Does anybody know why it would be called the Monastery of Qartmin? What's Qartmin? When you go up the mountain, for those who went to the monastery, on the bottom of the hill there's a village called Qartmin. That's why it's called the Monastery of Qartmin. It was established in the 4th century, and it is now a very active monastery, probably one of the most active monasteries in our church. It has a funny name in Turkish. You see it there in color. It says Deir Monastery. A funny name because you know what Deir is? Monastery. And Umur comes from Umro. There are two Syriac words for monastery, Deiro or Umro. So Deirul Umr is the monastery of the monastery. And in the Turkish it becomes the monastery of the monastery of the monastery. So that's Mar Gabriel Monastery. And the Mar Gabriel Monastery also has quite a good number of nuns. This is last summer. I took students from North America, from Europe. We went there and we did a course, a travel course. So this picture is from that trip. And if you go there, people will take care of you. On a trip about 20 years ago, Christine, my wife, got sick and they took very good care of her. So all our monasteries are very hospitable. Another monastery that I just visited on my last trip last month. This is Deir Matta in Iraq. It's in the middle of a mountain. In the old days, the car couldn't get there. Until even the 1980s, I believe. You couldn't get there, you had to climb. But now, the car will get to the monastery. I've always wanted, I travel a lot and I've always wanted to visit this monastery, but unfortunately Iraq goes from one war to the next, from one war to the next, so there was no opportunity. So I was invited to a conference just last month in North Iraq, in Erbil. So I took that opportunity to visit the monastery. It was also founded in the 4th century, Deir Matta, and we talked about Deir Za'faraan being the seat of the patriarchs. Deir Matta was the seat of the Mafarians. Does anybody know what the Mafarian is? Mafarian. So we have a patriarch on top, and next, after the patriarch, we have a Mafarian, because the church was split in two empires. In the Byzantine Empire, where the patriarch was ruling, and east of the Euphrates, where Deir Matta is, where Iraq is, where Iran is, was under the Persian Empire. And it wasn't easy for the patriarch to rule there. So there was a deputy, so to speak, a Mafarian. Mafarian, he was like the patriarch, but only in that, his domain is only in that area. We called it the Church of the East of the Syriac Orthodox Church. And we had Mafarians until the 1800s. At some point, they resided, that was their center, and they resided in Deir Matta. Deir Matta, also in modern history, is important because we talked after Saifo, the patriarch had to leave Mardin, and at some point he wanted to hold a synod. Now they hold synods every 2 years. But in our church, usually they only held the synod when a patriarch died to elect a new patriarch. And that was it. It wasn't easy to travel. So he wanted to be kind of a modern synod. It was planned initially in 1927 to be held in St. Marks in Jerusalem, the first monastery I showed you, because we talked about they were trying to move the patriarchate to Jerusalem. it didn't work out. So 3 years later, 1930, they held the synod in this monastery in Deir Matta. And I'm going to link it to this parish and to the parishes in the United States. In 1927, when it was going to be held in Jerusalem, and also in 1930, the Patriarch wrote to the Americans, the Syriac in America, the Diyarbakir is here, the Khartoum is in Worcester, the folks in Rhode Island, these were the 3 parishes. We're going to hold the synod, send your representatives. But it wasn't easy to send representatives from the United States, so they held a meeting, I believe it was in Patterson, and basically they sent their ideas, their proposals, their demands, and they chose 2 people in the Middle East to represent them. So those 2 people, one was called Kilkenny, if I remember correctly. They said they would represent us in America. And if we look at their demands and the decisions of the synod, some of what they wanted were granted. So Resolution 21 of the synod allowed the Syriac in America to switch from the Julian calendar to the new Gregorian calendar. So instead of celebrating Christmas on January 6th, then they could do it on December 25th, but except Easter. They were not permitted to move Easter. They were also, another resolution said every once in a while we're going to send you a bishop, because there was no bishop here. To bishop to visit you, to ordain deacons, to see to your needs. And many requests that the Americans from here asked of the synod, not just for them but for the general church, were also taken care of. They called for the establishment of a seminary. The synod decided to establish a seminary. It took a few decades later until it was established. Sunday schools. The first church to organize a choir and a Sunday school in the history of the entire Syriac Orthodox Church is this parish. It was in West New York at the time. And also, they decided that parish priests who used to get gifts from people should actually have salaries. That was an idea that was sent from these parishes in the United States. There are other monasteries that we don't have time to talk about, but on our last trip we visited so many of them. Marar Monastery in Tur Isla is a monastery where there are only 2 monks, but it doesn't like that many visitors because it doesn't like just people to go for tourist purposes and take pictures. They welcome people who want to go and pray with them and live the spiritual life with them. So each monastery has its own characteristics. That we visited a monastery of Marar Monastery, also on Tur Isla. It has 1 monk, Deir, he's building a library there. They work in the field. They build everything themselves. We visited Malatya Monastery that has 2 monks. I remember visiting them more than 20 years ago. It was a difficult time. 20 years ago, there were war between the Turkish state and the Kurdish rebels. And all the area around the monastery, the lands even of the monastery, were burned by the state so that the rebels don't go and hide between trees. So that made life difficult also on the monks. And I remember one of the monks said, "I'm not leaving." He was young at the time, and he was still there when I went there. We also visited Adıyaman, where Bishop Melki went there and established or re-established our church in Adıyaman. After Saifo, many Syriac left, but some stayed, some converted to Islam. Some stayed Christian, but hiding their Christianity. So he went to Adıyaman and re-established the church, and now these people are coming back to church. Of course, we also have some monasteries in Europe. The late Bishop Cicek established Marar Monastery in Holland, Marar Monastery in Germany, and there's Marar in Switzerland. And Sayyidina, the patriarch now, is establishing a monastery in Sweden. We can think of the Mac as a semi-monastery. It's not officially a monastery, but it's kind of a monastery, especially when monks live there. I am going to leave you with a video. If we can switch to the video. This is in Urfa. We visited Urfa and we were tired the whole day, but then we want to go and visit our churches. The Urfalis, all en masse in the 1920s, left Urfa. And this particular church, one church became a mosque. This one is not a mosque, it's a cultural center. But I just want you to see it, to see how it feels to go and to visit one of these places, especially a place like this that was abandoned. So there's a lot of emotions involved. If we can play the video, I don't know if we can hear it also.
This is St. Peter and St. Paul in Urfa, Edessa. This is the church that the Syriac left in 1922. It's a huge church.
It's a big church.
It is now a municipality center. It looks like they have meetings at place maybe. There's a piano on the altar, so maybe it's for talks, for plays. This is the altar. Those windows are behind the altar. بدنا الكوكب عقام
So I encourage all of you, when you go on your vacations, to visit these places. The living monasteries, they like to get people to visit them because it supports them. And also abandoned places like this, it's good to have connections to these things. Maybe the Urfalis can put a trip together to go to Urfa. Thank you again, Abuna. Thank you again, all of you, for listening to me. One thing we can learn, a sermon has to have a message, so there was no message, but maybe the message is hospitality, is as these monasteries are hospitable, that we should always be hospitable to others. Thank you.